Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. My name's Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Today we have Sean Reyes in our studio. He is the Attorney General of Utah. More importantly, though, he's just a really nice person and extremely family focused. And we're excited to have him to talk about his vision and his thoughts on parenthood and fatherhood and being a gentleman. Sean, thanks for being with us.
Guys, I'm excited to be here. It's a treat, and I've known you all for a long time. I'm so, really impressed by what you've done with the podcast. I think you're touching a lot of people out there, and man, the themes and the things that you talk about are essential, especially in today's environment and with all that our kids are being assailed with and all the threats and the many dangers that lurk.
Yeah, I've got so many questions that I've been wanting to ask you. I know you get asked to be on a lot of podcasts, and so we are grateful that you accepted to be on the podcast today. But as I've known you over the years and followed you on social media, I know that family is like the number one thing for you, right?
Absolutely.
So your heritage, talk to us a bit about your heritage, about your family makeup, and why that family has always been at the forefront, no matter what you've done in your 8 years, right? In public service, has always stayed at the forefront of who you are as a person. Is family is number one.
Man, how much? We have an hour and a half? Gosh, careful, you gave the mic to a public official who happens to be a lawyer and asked him about his favorite topic, his family. And I could talk about my family, my parents, who I miss dearly. I lost my dad just this last year and lost mama a few years ago. They were such an inspiration to me, and have throughout my entire life, successes and failures been there. And so I would love to talk about them a little bit and their legacy. And then of course, my wife, who I started, I know Kirk, you started the Gentleman Project Club organization, effort, initiative a number of years ago. Yeah. About that time, maybe a little bit before, I started an organization called the Married Up Club. So when you marry up above your rank and station and you do a lot better and you outkick your coverage, that's you qualify. And by the way, knowing
I'm in that club,
your wives,
for sure.
Knowing them, I would waive the membership. You guys are automatic admits in.
Sweet.
Because you guys definitely
member of the Married Up Club. Yeah.
But my wife is, she's that inspiration. She's an angel. Her name is Seisha. And after 6 kids, 25 years of marriage and a number of careers, she's been always there and supportive. And she's my ace in the hole. She's the secret for how I'm able to have what successes we've had, whether that's in public life or in private life. And then my children, I could talk about them too. There's 6 of them and they're so awesome because they're like their mom. But going back to my parents, by the way, I've got 2 rockin' siblings also. One is a, vice president at UVU and a superstar in academia. And the other, she is a business leader in California. And I draw inspiration from all of them. They're all so unique and they've all taught me so much. So shouts out there to Dr. Kyle Reyes and Noreen Noble, my awesome siblings. Mom and dad couldn't have come from, kind of more diverse places in some ways. My dad was the nephew of the president of the Philippines. On that side of the family, they were the aristocracy.
Yeah.
He grew up in Malacanang Palace for years as a young boy. So he was at the pinnacle, and he wanted to have his own identity because he didn't want to just be the godson of the president. I mean, but they were that close, and it's hard. He was so proud of his uncle, who, by the way, was a tremendous president for that country. He was, graced the cover of Time magazine. The Nobel Prize in Asia is named after him, the Magsaysay Award, right? The equivalent to. He is perhaps the greatest leader that Asia has ever seen for so many reasons. And so my dad was conflicted, loved his uncle, but wanted to be his own person.
Yeah.
And so taught himself how to draw. And then over time became so proficient that the Holy Father, the Pope of the Catholic Church, invited my dad to become his personal artist and do his portraits. And
holy cow!
No kidding. I did not know that.
Learning a whole bunch of new stuff about you, Sean.
Oh, and there's more. That's just one of the things. And if that was all he had done, my gosh, that story would be so compelling. But beyond that, he was kicked out of a couple of choirs, kind of like me. I think I'm one of the only young men to ever be kicked out of a choir for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because usually they're just like, hey, if you can open your mouth, you come on in. But my aunt in Hawaii, she and others were all professional singers. And I didn't make the grade. I'm an embarrassment to them when it comes to singing. And so I literally got kicked out. So like my dad, I can understand his pain when he was, excommunicated from the choir. And so he taught himself in a closet to play the guitar and sing. And along the way became again so accomplished at that he was discovered by Bob Hope. And Mr. Hope took him as the opening act on these big USO tours. So Dad was the Elvis of the Philippines. He had his own records, his own radio show, his own TV show, not a podcast. So not as cool as you guys, but
just Bob Hope.
Yeah. And it's funny because I say Bob Hope and all the young people are like,
who's Bob Hope?
Who? Like, I don't know, like Justin Bieber, maybe. Like he's like the Drake that just go like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Not some mid guy, but that was awesome. He also had a passion for film. He loved movies, and he'd grown up watching. Had used to take the sheets that his mom and cut them and string them up and sell tickets to the neighborhood kids and do his own homemade like movies as a young boy. Just that kind of creative genius mixed with a lot of mischief. And he became a line producer for MGM Studios. This is all in his late teens, early 20s. So as a very young man, he's got 3 careers. He's bought 3 homes for his 10 brothers and sisters and his parents. He's kind of got it made, and finally sort of not eclipsed by his uncle, the former president. He thinks, wow, this is awesome, except a very ambitious senator in the Philippines runs for office, and my father opposes him. The senator becomes president. My father is still very vocal in opposition to him. In my father's words, the president's goons come with guns to his head and say, hey, look, we're all part of the same family, right? I mean, we're all the aristocracy. Well, why are you doing this? Because you've got everything. Just keep your mouth shut, and you don't lose anything. Like we'll leave you alone. Your family is our family. And in that environment, I think, the Spanish aristocracy were all cousins and second cousins. They're like, come on. And my dad wouldn't keep his mouth shut. He kept speaking out against what he perceived to be injustice and somebody that would endanger the Constitution and the liberties of the people of the Philippines. And because of that, things got so bad that in the middle of the night in 1967, his aunt, the former First Lady, she had helped him procure a travel visa to go ostensibly just sing and paint in the U.S. But that was kind of their secret escape hatch should things get really, really bad. And they got bad. She came to him and said, look, we have intelligence that you might be executed as soon as tomorrow. We don't know, but we don't want to take the chance. So we're going to send you away. And he's like, where am I going? And she said, oh, Los Angeles. So for a second, he got excited. Like, hey, I've always wanted to play in Hollywood. That's my dream. But he said, but when do I come back? And she said, son, you never come back while Ferdinand Marcos is the president of the Philippines, because he'll kill you here. He'll probably kill you in Los Angeles, but we have a better chance of stashing you somewhere over there. This is crazy. And that was the sort of the circumstances at the time. Now, again, that was my father's experience. That's how he told it. It was traumatic for him. He came one way, not knowing anybody, without any money. He didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to his girlfriend, his bandmates, all these others out there, friends, business partners. Kissed his mom and dad, his brothers and sisters goodbye. And for decades, he never got to return home. And he got to the United States, and it was for him, he was always an optimist. It was like, okay, well, at least I'm alive, right? And at least my family's safe. So I'm going to make the most of this. So he's homeless, starts just working out Venice Beach. The painters who do these little seaside paintings and all that, they figured out quickly that he was better than them and he could churn out paintings really fast. So they just had him do their paintings and they would sell them and they would give him like dog food or apples or whatever, like here, just run along.
Oh,
but he was fine. Again, he was like, hey, at least I'm alive. And America, he's like, I always admired America. I loved America. That's why I watched the films. Always wanted to come to America. And now here's my chance. This isn't how I would have chosen to come to America, but I'm here. So let's make the best of it. And he was cagey, right? He was a former intelligence officer in the Philippine Army, had buffaloed his way in and talked his uncle, who was the president, to let him in 3 years early. So he was young. He had experience. And he's like, look, I memorized every street on the Thomas Brothers Guide map so that if police ever pulled me over, I was like, oh yeah, I'm from this neighborhood. I'm from there. And because at the time, he's like, I was worried that they would deport me back, right? I had a visa, but it wasn't permanent. And I knew that. And I was looking for a way to start the process. But INS at the time, which is Immigration Naturalization Services, that no longer exists, that agency, they would routinely go around and sweep up immigrants and send them back. And so this is what happened with my dad. He was living with 10 day laborers, his friends who were Mexicans, who were great. They were working hard, trying to make money, living in a little like 2-bedroom ramshackle apartment. And INS would sweep in, take them, and they try to ship him back to Mexico. And he said, you can't send me to Mexico. I don't know anybody there. They're like, well, you'll be fine. You're short, you're brown, your last name's Reyes, you'll be good. And he's like, no, where should we send you? He's like, I'm Filipino. We'll send you back to Manila. No, I'll get killed there. What do we do with you? He said, I don't know. You guys have me. And so they put him in a detention facility for weeks or months and try to figure out what to do with him. So this kind of happened a few times. When he was out of detention one time, a friend of his who lived above him in these apartments, he had 10 new friends that they were living together, and said, hey, there's a Martin Luther King art contest. Tragically, Reverend King had just been slain in 1968, and his wife, an incredible, amazing lady and leader, Coretta Scott King, she sponsored a national art contest for her husband's legacy and to celebrate his life and his memory. And my dad's friend, this blind older gentleman who lived upstairs, just kind of shouted down. The walls were so thin. Hey, buddy, hey, this is your chance to show America, how great you are. I've heard you were an awesome artist back, with the Pope. Yeah. So my dad said, I don't have canvas to paint on. I don't have paints. I can barely afford to eat. And his neighbor said, I've got paints, from he didn't say 50 years ago. They were all dried out. Dad takes those, puts some Crisco oil or something in there, doesn't have a canvas, looks up, unscrews the cupboard door in the kitchen cabinet, right, or there in this little apartment, takes out the hinges and turns it around. And it's like, oh, well, that's pretty white on the inside. Let's paint on that. Does a portrait of Martin Luther King with his 2 great inspirations, Mahatma Gandhi underneath, and the Savior Jesus Christ up on the corner. And Dad's like, he said, I felt good about it, but I didn't get a chance to paint it. I had just drawn it. I'd put a wash over it, and then I was going to go in and paint everything when he got swooped up in another INS raid. And it was the same thing again. Hey, we're sending you to Mexico. I can't go to Mexico. Why not? You're short, you're brown. Your last name's Reyes. We'll send you to Manila. I can't. I'll get killed. He ends up in a detention facility again and never gets to turn in the painting. However, miraculously, the blind old guy upstairs, his friend, takes the painting and just starts walking around downtown Los Angeles. Dad was in a tough part of LA. It was dangerous. So I could just imagine this picture of this guy. Hey, where do I turn in the Martin Luther King painting? And everyone's just staring at him. As fortune would have it, he ends up on a bus, and an assistant librarian, again, these are all stories that we've heard since we were children, but assistant librarian, I don't have her name. if she's ever out there, she hears this podcast, or her children here, please reach out to us. She hears this old guy talking about Martin Luther King art contest. And she says, sir, I think our branch is sponsoring that. Why don't you come with me? But it may be over already. I don't know. We have to hurry. So they get there and just in time get the painting submitted. It's not even a painting. It's not fair to call it that because he didn't really finish it. But it goes on incredibly to win for Los Angeles. And so they're like, wow. They send it and it goes and it wins statewide for all of California. So then it's sent on to the national contest. And lo and behold, in the end, it's selected as the winner of the National Martin Luther King Art Contest.
This is a story, man.
It's like movie stuff.
Yeah, I know. So imagine Coretta Scott King, who's now so excited to meet the author, or excuse me, the painter, the artist. She goes to blind old guy because it was his name that he put it in. And he's like, no, that's not me. It's my friend Buddy. Well, where's Buddy? So my dad's name was Norberto Antonio Reyes, but Buddy was his nickname and his performing name. And everybody's like, where is he? They're like, oh, he's in jail. And Coretta Scott King's like, what? Why? Oh no, he's great. I don't know. He has this thing that he's from the Philippines. They're all trying to send him to Mexico, but he hangs out there and he sings for them and helps cook for them and whatever. And so they go down over there with Coretta Scott has her lawyers and she's like at the INS, office now going, is there a Buddy Ray? Yeah, he's here. Is he dangerous? No, we love him. He's like sings and performs for us. He's like our buddy. Well, why do you have him in detention? Well, we don't know what to do with him. He's here legally, but we don't know. There were no asylum laws, interestingly, until 1969 in the U.S. So he predated those, and it was kind of this no man's land. And finally, she said, "Look, he's the National Martin Luther King Art Contest winner. It would be a blight to my husband's legacy if you left him in here. Is there any way you could release him to our?" Her lawyers worked it out. She was an angel of mercy. Pulled my dad out, took him to Atlanta, sat him in between two Georgia senators who said, "Buddy, don't you love this country? Welcome to America." And he said, "I do." He said, I love this country with a passion. I would love to be a citizen of this country. He said, "One problem. You see in the front row, this INS agent that's followed me all the way from Los Angeles. My dad called him Javert from like the Les Miserables, if you know that kind of, this constable who's focused only on justice and no mercy." And he's like, yeah, if Javert had his way here, he would deport me the first chance back to Manila and I'd be killed there. And the senators were so moved by his story, they said, "Let us help you," and helped him start his pathway towards legal residency and citizenship, get his green card, get his citizenship. And it was great. But that was, again, the start. Dad used that opportunity and his painting and skills to, as I grew up, become a successful artist. We would have people like John Wayne come to the house and sit for his portrait. Gene Autry, hopefully your listeners will remember, and they're, not so young that they're like, who the heck is that? But Magic Johnson, Lakers. We lived across the street from the Fabulous Forum, and we were huge Lakers fans, and so he would come and sit for his portrait. And Dad was a Western artist, so we would go sometimes and take the motorhome and drive it around the United States to Mountain Men rendezvous or to reservations for our Native American brothers and sisters, tribes that would adopt him into their tribe because he was so respectful of their traditions and cultures and loved it so much and illuminated them in his art pieces. And so he did that. He actually later on then was a Hollywood producer and director and was able to hearken back to that passion and make some, they were terrible movies to be honest, but they got him to Cannes and Milan and AFM and helped fulfill that dream and that passion of his. And he had all sorts of other businesses. So he was an entrepreneur and just an incredible kind of hero for me, but always emphasized this country is the greatest country, not because Americans are inherently better than anybody, not because they deserve better, but because of the opportunities and the liberties that you have that are so entrenched and so well protected, but you could lose those. Americans have to realize that they have to be vigilant. And so civics and the Constitution and those things were very important growing up. Not politics per se, but a passion for protecting liberty, and we heard a lot about that. And he always said, serve every chance that you can get, serve anywhere, and do things the right way, win the right way. We'd rather lose a deal. We'd rather lose funding for a production. We'd rather lose a game. He coached me in basketball and many other sports. We'd rather lose a championship doing it the right way than to win doing it the wrong way. However, we're going to try to win doing it the right way. That's our ultimate goal. But if we had to choose, our integrity, our honor, our family name is more important than all of those other things. And so having that kind of heritage from my dad's side was amazing. And then my mom's side, she's from Hawaii, born and raised on the Big Island in North Kohala. From her dad's side, Japanese, so she was a Maeda, and her family line goes back. If you study the great family lineage of these, daimyo era shogun and great warrior families, the Maeda family going back to Ishikawa, Ishikawa Prefecture and province, like Kanazawa Castle, all these great moments in Japanese history. Our family was part of that history. So hearkening back and feeling that I don't know if it was seventh, I've got to go back and do the genealogy or look at it again, but say seventh or eighth great grandfather was King Kamehameha, or grand uncle, King Kamehameha Mo'i. He was King Kamehameha the first who united the Hawaiian Islands. He was born in the same little town that my mom was, and our family had stayed there. And so as a kid, I would hear these great stories of our heritage from my mom's side, royalty from Kamehameha, nobility from the Maeda side and clan. And mixed in all that, I didn't know this until I took some 23andMe and Ancestry.com tests over the last few years, is a significant Chinese heritage. It started at like 5%, and as they run the tests, it gets more and more and more. I'm like 17%. I was once speaking with the Chinese ambassador. We were co-keynoting a conference, and he jokingly said, we really like the Attorney General. If he keeps taking more tests, he might be 100% Chinese, in a few years. But when you have that richness of, differing backgrounds, there's a lot to choose from. At the same time, being an Asian American Pacific Island kid in the middle of a mostly African American neighborhood, then moved out to a mostly Jewish neighborhood, there were a lot of times that we struggled to feel accepted. And, on top of that, my dad was Catholic, my mom was LDS. And those were more things to feel sort of out of the norm, so to speak, in the communities in which I grew up. So we struggled when I was born. We lived in a very humble side of Westchester, Inglewood, which are tough neighborhoods, and then saved up. And when Dad's businesses started to do better, Mom was a 50-year career educator, taught me so much about making a difference for individuals as a teacher, a counselor, a dean, a vice principal, a principal. But we had enough money to save up. We were the poorest family in a nicer neighborhood, and learned a lot about it. Went to Hebrew school with some of my Jewish friends to learn about their culture, and played a lot of sports, DJ'd, did martial arts with my dad. Lots of different things. Was a comic book, Dungeons and Dragons, drama geek too. I wanted to try everything, and I wasn't excellent at anything, but I was pretty good at a lot of stuff. So I just kept trying out different things. Grew up there in Southern California, and spent summers either back home in Hawaii on the Big Island, very rural cow town, on my grandparents' land there, or in the motorhome as we traversed the United States looking for, subject matter for my dad to paint. So it was great. It was diverse. Got to see a lot of different states and communities and cultures and traditions. And I think all of that really influenced who I am, but also how I approach my kids and raise my children. And I know again, you've asked one question and I've gone on for 45 minutes, so I'll just shut up.
You have, you have provided a more robust background than most of our guests do about where they come from, but most of our guests don't have the story that you have to tell. So,
That's right.
as a friend, I didn't know any of these things. So it's nice to know why. Now it's blazingly clear to me why family is so important to you, to have people like your mom and dad having influenced you. And, our tagline on the podcast is things my father taught me. So all of those things that your father taught you, and the importance of family growing up, how are you now? Give us some of the rubber meets the road stuff. So when your kids are now removed 2 generations from that stuff, and they hear the stories like you heard the stories of growing up and why family and heritage and culture is so important, what are you doing practically with your kids right now?
Things that he did practically that had an imprint on me. A lot of dads, my dad was wildly creative. So every night he would tell us a different bedtime story. And he just had the gift to be able to spin yarns, and it was amazing. And sometimes I couldn't tell what was fantasy versus what was reality. His story sounds fantastic. And I went back to the Philippines, and as I've gone back and looked in the archives and talked to historians, his whole story of his uncle and assassination attempts on the family and all these things, those are all true. But his gift of being a great artist, also every night, to me, that was one of the greatest treasures that I've ever had, is taking the time every single night. Now, he would add, with his own unique twist, he would read from How to Win Friends and Influence People. He would read from Og Mandino. He would read from all these people that he thought were, that had insights. He would also read scriptures. So I'd get a wild story. We'd read from the Bible or Book of Mormon. His Bible is Catholic, and, my mom and was our own scriptures, Bible, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price. And then after that, I would get this dose, 5 years old. Can you imagine, to a 4, 5, 6-year-old kid reading over and over all of these different types of self-help and motivation? Tony Robbins was not around then. Tony's actually a dear friend, and I love him. But I've told him at once, I'm like, Tony, everything that you've talked about, my dad talked about as a kid in a different way. And Tony was very upfront. He said, yeah, I don't profess that these things are all new truths. They're just, I package them in a way that can resonate with certain people. And I think that's what my dad was trying to do. I don't know if that helped, but I've got to think that a lot of what I've been able to do in my life, I owe to his, sort of those early years of planting those seeds. I also want to just talk about his demeanor for a second, because my mom was the quintessential tiger mom. My mom was like Asian. I got like 1 A- that I can remember in my entire, junior high school through college career. And my mom grounded me like all summer. And it was an A- in 9th grade in AP calculus. And I actually had an A, but the teacher was like trying to teach me a life lesson. I still remember her, Ms. Gregorian. And she's like, Sean, I want to tell you that, I want to show you that you can get an A- and your life won't be over. And I was like, you don't know my family. It will. You've never met my mom. My life will be over. And I had earned an A, still galls me to this day. And she's like, look, it's not a strong A. It's like a 96. But so I'm just going to give you an A- and watch, you're still be. So she literally just gave me an A-. And my mom was like, nope, you could have done better. I know you're smarter than that. I know you're better than that. And I was like, summer all like, nope, no. That's my mom. Had her personality was, even when she was trying to compliment you, she could make you feel bad because she was a little bit more stern. My dad, when he was chastising you, he did it with such love, and he was so excited about it. Like, son, this is going to be awesome. You're grounded for 2 weeks, but imagine all the cool stuff that you'll be able to do. Like, you won't be bothered with TV. You can read these. Here, I'll give you a list of these 3 books. These are my favorite. When I was and by the time he was done, you were like, wow, could we do this again? Like, you just disciplined me, and I want some more. And it was an interesting contrast, because I think I needed both of those styles. But my dad also had a tendency to not be around as much. So as much as I want to highlight how positive my dad's approach to things were, when he did the nightly readings, and then I might not see him until the next night. And he was maybe a workaholic. He was gone too much. and wasn't involved enough in the day to day and left my mom to have to, deal with all that. So I want to be honest about it. I learned from my father, both from the good side and the other side. And I think I might have inherited some of that workaholic tendency, but looking at him and his example, I try to really focus on involving my kids. So instead, what I do, and I think my dad was decent at this, when he would go into an art show or when he had a movie screening or he was shooting on location somewhere, he'd bring us along. Say, look, what you can learn in school is awesome. Close your ears, principals and teachers. But what I think I can teach you about life is more important in business. Let me just take you out of school for a week. And so by 7 years old, I was running craft service for his movies. So those in the industry will know that's where all the goodies, the food, the treats, the talent. I knew the movie industry from the ground up because I had lived it. My dad let me be involved. He'd say, hey, I've got 100 scripts here, people that send me their scripts. They've put so much of their life into this. I don't have time to read 100 of them. You're 11 years old, but you're smarter than a lot of, 18-year-olds that I know. I want you to read them. I'll give you a nickel for each one. Write a synopsis of the ones you think are really compelling. So if you don't think you make it through, you don't think it's great, just put it on the side. And we've given that person, a chance. And I remember writing up these things and my dad reviewing them and talking to me like I was an adult and treating me like I was an adult. And I think there's a balance, of course. I mean, kids, there's certain things that I believe should be adult appropriate and child appropriate in terms of entertainment. But I do think we underestimate kids a lot. And I believe that if we involve them in more adult, when I say adult conversations, not adult in terms of morality appropriate, but more mature conversations, and let them understand, hey, this is how you balance a checkbook. This is how you budget. These are the types of things that adults have to do. I want you to learn them young. And I appreciated that so much. I've tried to replicate those things with my own kids. And when I go out and have to travel, I try to bring one of them at least with me. There's 6 of them, so I have good rotation here. And here's a good example. A few years ago, a friend of mine who, you guys would be like, oh, yep, he's going to try to name drop. I'm not. He's just, it was a good opportunity. He's done a few films in martial arts and stuff. And so he invited me to China, and because we were going to work together on fighting human trafficking and on some of his green initiatives to help protect the environment, something I think is critically important. And so I went, and my wife wasn't going to be able to go. So I said, can I bring one of my sons along with me? And absolutely. And it was such an incredible opportunity to not only spend the time with this young man who was getting ready to go on a mission for our church, but then to expose him to a culture, help him get ready to leave the home, and this famous actor celebrity.
Are you talking about Jackie Chan?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm like, okay, I know what Jackie Chan does, and those are some of the things he does. So, okay, Jackie Chan.
Yeah. So Jackie hosts us there in Shanghai, and then takes us out to Bamboo, where he's built this an amazing replication of ancient Chinese villages and culture, and also a really nice hotel. But my son and I spend incredible time now, and then Jackie comes back to Utah, wants to reciprocate, so I get to host him here, and we do incredible, roll out the red carpet, the Capitol. Have my daughter's One Voice Children's Choir. She was a member there with Masa Fukuda, sing for Jackie. So it was great, and got to involve her in part of that and her choir. But I said, hey, would Jackie like to come spend time at our house? We spent time at his house. I'd love for. And there were all sorts of political and other issues. They had to run background checks on like my entire neighborhood. But a dear friend of mine, who is amazing, was able to get Jackie the approval to come stay at our home, and the interaction and being able to involve my family as part of that. It really fired up the kids, not only because they got to meet somebody who that was really cool and they'd seen in movies. But to hear him talk about his life experience growing up as a child, like the abuse that he grew up in a Peking circus where, I mean, he and Sammo Hung were the things that if you hear about Jackie's story, anyway, it's great to expose your kids to other people's experiences outside of America, because I believe it really helps them appreciate what they have more. But then to have him talk passionately about things, when they hear dad talk about, human trafficking, it's like, oh yeah, we know it almost white noise because they're so close to it. And I talk about it, but to have Jackie Chan in their house telling them about that or other important issues. And Jackie had, like I said, a recycling program that was incredible. And so my wife is going crazy because she's that crazy woman in the neighborhood that pulls recycling stuff out of your trash cans to recycle it in ours. And we have like 10 recycle bins, and she's so passionate about that. And so there's Jackie there talking about how important that is globally. These types of things, that's one example out of, thousands of where I really, with purpose, try to integrate my children, not because, they're privileged and they should have a chance over somebody else to meet someone like Jackie Chan. We took Jackie out and had him speak to a lot of Title I schools and to less fortunate families, because I think it's critical, because that was me growing up, and how cool would that have been to have that experience. But I say that with my kids because I really want them to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want them to see how hard life really is, how much sacrifice it takes, not just from their parents, but a lot of other people, how people have to work 2 or 3 jobs that are immigrants that come here, and why they would sacrifice being professionals in their own country to come here to America, and how we can support them in proper ways, and to be proud of their own heritage, and to reach out. America, for as great as we are in so many ways, we're pretty insular. We speak English and that's about it. We think too often that the world revolves around us. And unfortunately, in many ways it does. And I say unfortunately because it really doesn't incentivize us to go beyond. And so I've purposely, again, tried to make my kids go and do service, whether it's through one organization like YouthLink or another, go to foreign countries, spend weeks, learn other languages, or maybe not entire languages, learn a little more about their culture and they do speak different languages, but they didn't pick it up in 2 or 3 weeks. They come with me, with my wife. We try to take them, and recently this last summer, we spent several weeks in Hawaii. Kind of built up. I took the longest vacation that I've had in a long time, but I wanted them to go to each island because each island has a unique spirit, and we have relatives and traditions that they ought to know about. I think knowing about who you are, your history, your tradition really does make you stronger, and will help you during times of adversity and in decision-making processes. I think all of us need to know our heritage. I have a spiritual heritage that I strongly believe in, a divine spiritual heritage through God and his son Jesus Christ. And but on earth here, I've come to really want to know more and do more history and genealogy work and family history. So involving kids, spending time, having real conversations, knowing that they can fail. One of the downsides with my mom's Asian tiger mom approach is, did we accomplish a lot? Yeah. But we were so scared all of our upbringing of failing and bringing shame to the family or not achieving other people's expectations. I think that was a disservice. And I talked to my mom about that later on in life. And I think she recognized, too late for us, but for our kids. And she took a different approach with our grandkids. And it was funny. She's more just supportive, unconditionally. and accepting that we're all unique people, and that, as you well know, children are so distinct and different, and what works with some won't work with others, and just their method of learning and what they like. Some are auditory learners and some are visual learners. And it's such a blessing to have kids and to learn from them. And they teach me lessons every day about myself. And I when it comes to what this podcast is about, when I'm making critical decisions and we have people's lives in our hands, I think whether it's conscious or just subconscious, so much of the influence of my parents and my culture and my heritage and my wife and my own kids and how I make decisions, how will this affect my children and their children? If my son Sam were here, because I admire his empathy and his compassion, how would he approach this? If my son Kai were here, he's so incredibly analytical. And if he were using his game theory that, he's learning at the University of Utah, and how would he do it? Or my daughter, I admire so many aspects of her and her ability to be emotionally supportive. And so not every decision of the thousands that I make in a week to run a large office go through all of that sort of analysis, but many of the important ones do. And so I look at those times to interact with kids as being not only ones to try to help teach them correct principles, but to help teach me or reinforce in me the right things to do. And they're honest, right? They'll tell you, hey, Dad, I think you could be doing better at this. And, this is not a confessional, but we were driving back from a family trip up to Bear Lake, and I had them in there, and I said, you know what? Your mom presented to me an issue. I'm not sure I entirely agree with this, but it's something that was important to her. And I'd like to bounce it off you all. Maybe I was subconsciously hoping for some support and saying, hey, Dad, we all think you're right. And maybe that's a better approach to what Mom proposed. And they were remarkably diplomatic. Maybe they picked that up and said, I think you're both right. And I think maybe even after 25 years, you're both not just exactly speaking the same language on this issue, and let us try to translate for you. I think this is what Mom's saying, and I think this is what you're saying. And by the time I was done, I was like, man, this is so much better. I don't have to pay for therapy. Right? I don't have to.
I got my kids. And I want to say something about that too. Growing up in a warrior culture like I did, and also being the top law enforcement leader in the state, there's a lot of pressure about, and there are perceptions about, shrinks and going in and spilling your guts, and like literally culturally, the uncles and aunts that I grew up with were like, these Howleys, that's you all, these white people, Caucasians. So no wonder they're kind of messed up, because they go in and sit down and talk about their feelings, and those people probably messed them up more. And look at these therapists, they have messed up lives themselves. And so there was really a stigma attached to going in and talking about things like depression that would lead to suicide ideation and addiction. And as I've become even more and more and more involved in working with survivors and victims and people who've broken some of those cycles, and certainly on the criminal side, trying to prevent those things from hurting our children and our families here in Utah and across the U.S. and around the world, I've become more appreciative of being able to sit down with a professional and talk very openly and honestly about what's hurting me and how this is affecting me, or to do it with Seisha and myself together. And I think we're starting to, because you see NBA players and NFL players starting to talk about this and give cover to everyday people to say, these things are real. Just like you'd go in to see a physician if you were ailing, if you were suffering from, heart conditions, or your knee was
was really hurting, you wouldn't think twice about going if you could afford it. You had affordable health care and you were able to address it. You wouldn't think twice about getting help and advice. But for some reason, when it's about mental health and behavioral health, there still is attached far too much shame and stigma. And I think that's something that, that's a journey that my family has been on that I've discovered. They've helped me learn to be more honest and to be more with, just in terms of sharing feelings, because it's not something that we did culturally growing up. And that was a evidence of weakness, in fact. And man, I hope that those listening will, if that rings true with them. There's so many people suffering silently, our friends, and they may appear to be doing great on the outside. So this is not just for, people who are struggling in other ways. These are for those people who look like everything's going their way. Well, in many cases it's not. And they're thinking about taking their own lives, or they're struggling with addiction, or they're struggling with really, really difficult issues, things like loneliness that and alienation. And so many of the programs that I've instituted and have supported as the Attorney General have focused on those types of things. The Safe UT app, to be able to have young people be in contact with world-class professionals who can help them talk through these things and have crisis support, whether it's for them or somebody that they care about. They might be calling in because their little sister has a drug addiction, or their little brother who's 9 has already, is watching tons of pornography, and they think that's, an issue or problem, or a friend of theirs bringing a gun to school to get even with the bullies who, cyberbullying. There's so many of these issues that affect kids these days, and looking for resources like smartphones. I've recently worked with a local Utah company called Gab Wireless a lot, because I really like that they don't just create patches or a Band-Aid on top of the current phone systems. It's not just an app to help parents filter out some of the smut and some of it's because no matter how good those apps are, there's always these other backdoor channels. This whole system, they created a closed system so that parents and children can communicate and use phones for what they were intended to be used for, stay in contact, without the constant barrage of all these other assailants and threats. And so when I find technologies like that, and I'm not here to pitch any particular company or technologies, just that struck me. Hey, this is something that I wish every parent had at least the chance to look at, those types of resources. Those are things that I get passionate about. And the reason that I focus so much on fighting human trafficking is that children around the world are disproportionately represented as victims, whether it's sex trafficking, sex exploitation. It's not just the act of the sex itself. They'll be filming them and streaming that and monetizing these kids that way, creating child pornography. And they'll force them to do other types of things that are just, you think about it, are heinous, but forced labor and putting them in life-threatening conditions around the world. Conscription is something that people don't think about, but little kids, if you recruit them young enough and you fill a 7 or 9-year-old with enough hate and teach them how to use automatic weapons and point them at a particular, enemy and say that they're evil, then kids will grow up and they'll be effective fighting machines. Illegal adoptions, clearly children are, so many of them are victims. Organ harvesting, which is a terrible thing that most normal people don't even want to think exists, but it's a multi-billion-dollar international industry, and kids are so vulnerable. I work with countries around the world. Utah is my focus, but I always say, because I want people to know, I put 70, 80 hours a week in defending and protecting Utah and its families and its businesses and its laws. So you guys are getting your money's worth here. But on my free time, when I would be coaching kids in football like I used to, or coaching them in basketball or doing scout camps, I don't anymore, because I'm in different countries trying to help them have a little bit of what we have here in America, more resources, and they're very appreciative to America. Nigeria is a good example. When I was in Nigeria recently, there are 2 million little children who've lost both of their parents to the HIV virus. So Cory, think about any of your kids lost and alone by themselves at a young age, trying to fend for themselves. Or Kirk, your kids, with no one to protect them, they're there. And all you have to do is be a trafficker who brings some candy or a little toy, and you can walk away with 3 or 4 little boys or girls. And even in a country and an economy like that, you can make estimates are $250,000 per child, selling them for cheap sex to Americans and Europeans who come down and exploit them. So you could be a king, you could be a god in that world by just trafficking out a number of kids, and no one knows who they are. No one knows that they're there. No one cares. And the thing that hurts my heart maybe most is thinking around the world how many kids who actually believe in a God, but believe that God has forgotten them because they've prayed every night for years and no one's come to get them. They don't believe that anybody even realizes that they're gone, perhaps, that their parents aren't looking for them, and they are, and we are. In many of the groups that I've worked with, whether it's International Justice Mission, Operation Underground Railroad, Child Liberation Foundation, my own foundation called LAVA, which stands for Liberate All and Value All. One of the reasons we started these is to not only provide resources for those who we rescue, who are survivors, but to send a message to traffickers around the world that the people are coming, that there's some heat out there. Drug traffickers, they're always looking over their shoulder because it's the DEA, or the similar agencies in other countries. There's a war on drugs. There's a lot of assets going towards drug interdiction, which there should be. I'm not saying the war on drugs particularly was a great success, but there should be. But no one's looking for kids. There's not a similar type of apparatus to go pursue human trafficking. They're starting to be, in large part because of Utah. Utah has become like the tip of the spear on many national programs and even international programs. Globally, people fly around the world to come to Utah to see why in this little small population area we've had so much success in this fight. And it's because of people like you, and it's because of podcasts like this that give us a chance to talk about these things. So many children, millions of them around the world, sucked up into this horrible enterprise of modern day slavery, fastest growing criminal enterprise globally. They say second most lucrative after drugs, but I don't know. I've done a lot of drug cases and I've done a lot of trafficking cases. Sometimes or often they're intertwined. They're the same. But I think trafficking is right up there with drugs, and people aren't afraid. If you're a trafficker around the world, there's very little risk. And these organizations that I talked about and many others around the world are doing great work to finally put some heat on those guys and make sure that they understand that there is risk. People are coming not only to rescue the kids, but to put them away and stop them in their tracks. And, that motivates me a lot. And that's just one issue that we're passionate about. We've worked in Utah on teen suicide so much because, let's be honest, we're doing a horrible job, and it's not an indictment on parents, but hey, I want to throw at least some hope out there to parents that there are some resources and tools for us to be able to address this. Suicide in Utah, as in many other states, is the number one cause of death for children and young people, almost no matter how you look at the demographics, 14 to 19, 16 to 22, and it's more than the next several causes of death combined. So accidents, natural causes, you can roll all of those up, and not as much as suicide. And so there are things that we have to do better as parents. I'm not saying that we'll be able to eliminate that, but let's take serious stock and retrospection about what we're doing when it comes to social media. when it comes to technology. And by the way, I'm a big tech guy. I used to help run a tech venture fund. I'm all about tech, but I think tech is like fire. It in the right hands and for the right purposes, it can change drastically. It can take us out of the dark ages into civilization, but it can also be used to burn down, as we've seen just recently. A couple, last week on the Hill, massive fires, and those that are raging around. It can be used in very destructive ways. And if you're a parent who's sitting in the middle of a forest fire right now and you feel like there's no hope with your kids, there is. That's why we have to come together. And your podcast is a great way to kind of throw out a beacon to bring parents together. And there are resources. And if they want to reach out to me on our website, either LAVA or the Utah Attorney General's office, we have a lot of resources, and we point to other federal partners and local partners and state partners that are doing great work. But that's why those things, to me, because they're about kids, I think that's been the governing sort of ethos for me. Drug addictions and opioids. I have a show called Addiction Unplugged. If you haven't seen it, go back on A&E and watch the first 10 episodes. It was one of their hit shows. Then COVID hit and we didn't get our season 2 up. We're now going to start season 2 filming pretty soon. Addiction Unplugged. The opioid epidemic is rampaging. It is the number one cause of death for Americans, more than breast cancer, more than auto accidents, death by overdose overall, but a large subset of that is the opioid problem that we have. And it used to be prescription opioids, and now it's moving more towards synthetic opioids like fentanyl, carfentanil, and they're coming in. And your kids have access to they can get these not just from friends. We used to say, hey, you're probably the biggest drug dealer in your neighborhood. You don't even realize it, because kids used to be, and it still happens, but it's starting to change. It used to be that they would go in your in your medicine cabinet, in your bathroom or in your kitchen, and just take all the unused opioids that you had left over from your surgeries that you've got up there. And so grandparents and parents often were the biggest drug dealers, providers in their neighborhoods. And we started to really hit that. But now we're starting to see, no, it's more fentanyl, and these kids can get it on the internet. They can get it on the dark web. It's really accessible. And so we have to do whatever we can to work together as parents to try to make sure you know where your kids are, what they're accessing, who they're hanging out with. All those old school things are incredibly important. Maybe I'm overreactive because I'm a law enforcement parent and I see the worst of humanity. I'm the guy that has to go with my guys and men and women in uniform, go deal with the seamy underbelly every day of child sex traffickers and murders and drug dealers and cartel stuff. And so I get really hypersensitive about, be very careful about how much you put of your family pictures and information on the internet. We were joking before we started the interview that I do certain things that other families probably wouldn't, pretend abductions of my kids and fake, teach them, assaults. But I want them to know. I want them to feel empowered. I think it's important to know physically, technologically, emotionally, how to protect your kids. And so things like vaping, we've been very in front of trying to curtail that threat for kids, and e-cigarettes, because that's, it's really started to take off amongst that population.
I've heard that just from my kids.
Yeah,
in junior high.
And it's younger and younger, right? The average age of pornography addiction is down to like 11 or 12 years old, because they're starting to get bombarded by the time they're on smartphones at 9 or 10 years old, and pretty soon, or it may not even be smartphones, just the internet, and they're home on their own family PC. So what are you doing? Where are your computers? You'll hear these a lot, but there's a reason. They're very simple but effective tools. Don't let your kids have their own computers just up in their rooms on their own. I know they want their own privacy. I get that. But if you set the expectation early and you give them opportunities to have some privacy and do some things, but it's not just there by default, man, they're smart. They know workarounds. Everything we do, they've got. Years ago, my commander for our internet crimes against children. She and her team go after, for the AG's office, child sex predators and pornographers. And she actually deputized my, at the time, 16 and 14-year-old to use them to train their agents, because our special agents are in their 50s. They're detectives who've had distinguished careers, and now they're working these cases, but they don't know the lingo. They don't know the apps. They don't know the sayings. And they needed my kids to just help educate them on how to go after these predators on the internet, who many of times will come into an environment and solicit sex from my own agents. But, if they don't have the vernacular and they sound like me, like a 50-year-old, then they disconnect. But if they are able to keep them on sounding like a 12 or 13-year-old, these guys will incriminate themselves. There's no entrapment needed. They'll start asking for things, sending photos, and doing all kinds of stuff. And then we can go get a warrant and pick them up. It is. I don't want people to be scared, but I want them to have a healthy realization for the threat that exists. And there are clear and present dangers out there. And the predators will exploit. They're masters at exploiting vulnerable kids. So those that are picked on, those that are alienated, those that are run away, those who are experiencing family issues and problems. So if there's a divorce in the home, and again, I understand there are reasons why two very good people may decide not to stay with each other anymore. But just understand that all those trauma, a death in the family, even from a grandparent, those increase the risk for kids. So all the more reason as a parent, when things are going on in their lives, be extra vigilant and extra careful, and make sure you hug them an extra lot, and make sure you tell them, I love you, to the point that they are embarrassed. That's okay. I'll share this because, time's running short, and I think it's for me, it was a poignant reminder when my mom was still alive. I was giving a TED talk. It was a TEDx talk at UVU here. That's Utah Valley University, an awesome university for our state, Utah. And my brother was also doing one there. And about a minute before I got on to give my speech, and they're almost militant of doing these TED events, because I speak at events, global events all the time, but they're like, okay, it's going to be 16 minutes long, and you are on this mark, and you better be here, or we're starting, the cameras rolling, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm a little nervous. Like, all right, I get a phone call literally a minute before I'm going on, because I'm in the back getting ready for my speech, and it's my mom. And I see the number, and I'm like, man, probably not a good time to pick this up. I'll grab it. From the TEDx talk, our family was going straight down to camp. We had won the lottery for this one particular campground in southern Utah that it's really hard to get. So like for 5 years, we've been trying. We finally got it. And so we were going to be down there. There's no Wi-Fi. So we'd be off the grid for a few days. But I thought, you know what? As soon as I get back from there, I'll call mom. I'll catch her up on the TED talk and everything else. We'll be good. So I kind of put it back in my pocket and just kept buzzing and buzzing. And I thought, oh man, all right, I got it. This is my mom. I got to answer this. So I pick it up and say, Mom, literally, I got like 45 seconds before I have to be on stage. And she's just calm and casual and says like, I've been reviewing your script, right? And she was a drama and speech major at BYU. And so now she's going to give me the critique, right? Like I'm a 6-year-old ready to give a primary talk or a Sunday school talk. And I'm like, Mom, I really don't have time right now for this. She's like, page 16. I'm like, oh my goodness. You say X, and she's like, I don't know if that's like, she said, you said that one of our relatives fought in the 442nd in World War II. You'd realize that that's not a blood relative. He married into the family. And I'm like, Mom, I don't think it matters. I'd say he's an uncle. Legally, he's an uncle. I know. I just don't want you to be like those, reporters who take liberties with the truth. And then, people find out. And then I'm like, Mom, thank you so much. I think I got this. I do this for like a living. I think I'm okay. And I said that in the earpiece that I've got, they're like, General, we're counting you down. You have 10 seconds, 9 seconds. You better be on your mark. And I'm like, Mom, I got to go right now, but I'll call you on Sunday when we're done with the camping trip. And she said, okay, son, I love you. I'm so proud of you. I know you'll do an amazing job. I just wanted you to know that I love you. And I said, I love you too, Mama. And she said, and tell your brother, I know that he'll do great too. And 3 in my earpiece, 2, I hung up. I had to scramble out. I made it. I think the TEDx talk was pretty good if you want to check it out on YouTube. What I didn't realize when we headed down to southern Utah and we were enjoying ourselves camping, we were driving razors up these mountains, was that the governor of the state of Utah, who had appointed me, he was trying to reach me. He literally had state troopers out trying to track me down because no one could call. And somehow, some way, a text pinged from my sister off of these red rocks down in southern Utah and hit my son's phone. She had sent it to everybody that she could, and it said, Sean, mom's on life support. We need you back as soon as possible in LA. We're waiting for you to let her go. What? You gotta be kidding me. I just talked to mom. There's no way. And so some angels intervened to help me get to where I needed to be on a Saturday night. It was the Saturday night before Easter Sunday. And so I was able to go and able to speak to her. She was not conscious. She couldn't talk back. And I got to tell her how much I love her. We all sang her favorite songs in English and Hawaiian, and got to say our goodbyes. And then we let her go on Easter morning. But as I reflected back on that, how fortunate, how happy was I that I took the call and had a chance to have that final exchange with my mom, and that the last things we talked about were loving each other and how proud we were. And I did get a chance to say goodbye to her, but she never had a chance to speak back to me. I'm sure her spirit was there and she could appreciate that. But as I think about that, and I've shared that because I think I could talk about policies all day long, and I could talk about programs like we're doing with the Lava Foundation. And please look us up at golava.org. But nothing is more important than family. And even if you're going in to give a Supreme Court argument, or you're going in to close the most important construction deal, Cory, on the face of the earth, or Kirk, even if you're going in to meet with an NBA team that wants to hire you to outfit all of them, none of that is as important as your family and taking a call from a loved one, whether it's your mom or your kids or anyone else. And so experiences like that really remind me again about what's most important. And I've talked about it before, but let me finish with this. Lava is so important because I get a chance to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits all around the globe. And I have friends who call me all the time. Hey, should I donate to this foundation? Should I donate to that one? Because part of my job constitutionally as the Attorney General is to oversee charities, make sure that they're legitimate, make sure that they're, that they're running, they're effective, that they're doing what they should be doing. So I know a lot of them, and I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people, I think this is a good one. I don't know that much about. Finally, I thought, I'm just going to create an intermediary, this organization called Lava. So if you want, you can donate to us. We vet dozens and dozens of different organizations. So if you want to fight in the human trafficking side, I've worked with 500 of them, but I've narrowed it down to about 10 that I know get great ROI, impact for your dollars. If you want in the fights in the opioid side, and you want to support families that have lost their loved ones to opioids, or to prevent the next generation from dying from drugs, I've worked with hundreds, and that I've narrowed it down to 10 or 15 that are great and incredible. And you, as a partner, a funding partner of Lava, can point out and say, I want to work with these 3, or I want to work with all of them. Just let my money go to support all of them. And we support these various organizations. The whole purpose of Lava, when they say liberate all, it is to free people from different types of captivity. Because I think there's physical imprisonment. Clearly, human trafficking is probably that's exhibit A. You can't get more, literal than that. We have people who are trapped physically against their will, but also child abuse, which is rampant. child sex abuse in particular is horrible and far too prevalent, even in this great state of ours. Domestic violence. Can you imagine being a spouse and stuck in that cycle of abuse and feel like there's no hope and you can never get out? These physical entrapments. We support nonprofits in all of those arenas and more. And then you pivot over to mental and behavioral types of prisons. Like I said earlier, people every day, your neighbors, you may not realize it, they're suffering too often from one or another sorts of these kinds, whether it's depression or PTSD, whether it's an addiction, could be a pornography addiction, it could be a drug addiction, it could be other type of substance. And they are so needing help and support. And so we support all sorts of different organizations. Economic imprisonment, people need educational opportunities. They need job training skills, spiritual imprisonment, cultural imprisonment. There's all sorts of different kinds. And so we have funding partners that are great. We have what I call influence partners, celebrities. So I can use friends like, not use, but invite friends like Jackie Chan. I don't want to just drop names, but we have a lot of UFC fighters, NBA players, NFL players, people in Hollywood who are passionate about these issues and will come. They may not write checks, but they will show up and they'll lend their celebrity to help raise awareness. And then we have our mission partners. So if you're a nonprofit and you're working in any one of these areas and you need help and support, please reach out. We would love to work with you and help bring our funding partners and our influence partners to potentially accelerate your growth. Now, we can't help every nonprofit everywhere, but we're careful. And again, that's golava.org.org. It's a newer venture. Lava harkens back to my, Hawaiian and Filipino roots. Guys, thank you. I know I'm like 2 hours over whatever time you allotted for me.
Well, let me say this, Sean, thank you for being with us. Content was amazing. I would believe that your dad would be proud of you because you've become a master storyteller too, in a good way. And I think that the listeners are going to gain a lot from what you had to talk to us about today. So
I hope so, brother.
For your
I
time.
really do. Just like I know your parents, Rob and Christy were always great to me. They were mentors, and to watch you assume the leadership, not just of this incredible company that, Big D that's here, but statewide, to be a leader the way you are and the character, man, thank you. You inspire me, and it's an honor to be here with you. And likewise, Kirk, watching you grow over the last couple of decades and to be the leader that you are. We were together not too long ago in honor of our friend Brent Taylor, whose life was lost, to recognize other law enforcement and military men and women who've given the greatest sacrifice. And I was so proud of you, watching you lead that effort. So yeah, the business side, you have my admiration, but it's really your character and who you are that to me is the greatest barometer of success in your life and your families and what you've done to help protect other families here in Utah and around the world. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Well, we appreciate you being with us today. I know you better now than I did before. That's for sure.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, it's great. I think it's good to know what our elected officials do with the time that they have and the causes that they're involved in. And some of the threats, that's, I think, the underlying theme for this podcast for me is making sure that I know what the threats to my family and my culture are, and making sure that I'm doing my job as a dad to be able to protect them.
That's awesome.
So we always end the podcast with the same question.
Okay.
And that is, what do you think it means to be a gentleman?
If I do nothing else, will you all download the Safe UT app? It's free across any platform because it's a lifeline that we've created here in Utah. Before we had 988, which is now the new 911. 911's physical emergencies. 988 is the national hotline for mental behavioral health. We created the Safe UT app. And for me, being a gentleman is taking care of people who can't really take care of you. Have nothing to necessarily offer you, but they're human beings. And it's taking care of them. And I can't think of a better gift, a better way to take care of them as a gentleman than to empower them with this lifeline. Safe UT, you text in your kids, it's anonymous. And so the kids like that. And if they're struggling in any way, it's like having the Avengers like on speed dial. They've got instant help that comes to wrap them in a cloak of love and support and care. And I can't tell you how many lives, countless. It's really hard to quantify how many lives that have not been taken. But I promise you, over the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of interactions we've had with Safe UT, the other side, again, are the world's top mental health experts. They're behavioral health geniuses, and they will help get our young people. It's not just, elementary through or K through 12. These are higher ed, our university students. And I've seen so many cases where people are still here on this earth doing good things, who've recovered, who are in a better place now, but are here because of the Safe UT app. And I really want to leave people with hope. And as a gentleman, it's treating people the way they ought to be, as if C.S. Lewis said, as if they were all potential gods. There are no ordinary people. And so a gentleman views every other person as having a story, being significant, having intrinsic worth, and also feeling that way about themselves so that God's light can emanate out from them and touch other people. That's how I feel.
I really like that.
Amen to that.
Yeah. I remember that was one of the first lessons that I taught my sons in the Gentleman Project was a gentleman takes care of those who can't take care of themselves.
Absolutely.
So thanks for sharing that.
I love it, man.
I'll make sure that my boys know that the Attorney General thinks the same thing as their dad, and give me a little bit of.
Bring them to the Capitol. we'll give them some junior deputy pins. We'll deputize them because that's what we need more of, more than legislation, more than policy, more than all those things. Those things are critically important, but each individual father, each individual family member teaching those principles of being a gentleman. That around the world would eliminate so much of the pain and anguish and suffering that exists.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks for all the good you do, Sean. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Please join us. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. And we will talk to you next week. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Make it a great week.